The Roman fast food industrial complex. The kitchenless city. Imagine you're living in the greatest city on earth. It's 115 AD. Rome is the center of the universe, a marble masterpiece of temples and theaters. But you? You don't live in a marble villa. You live in a fourth-floor walk-up in a district like the Subura. Your apartment is a single room made of cheap timber and sun-dried brick. It's cramped, it's loud, and most importantly, it's a tinderbox. Here's the reality of life for 90% of Romans. You are forbidden from cooking. If you light a fire to boil an egg, you risk burning down the entire block. The Roman insulae, apartment buildings, were notorious fire traps. They didn't have chimneys. They didn't have running water past the ground floor. If a fire started on the third floor, everyone on the fourth and fifth was essentially dead. Because of this, the Roman middle class and the poor lived a life that sounds bizarrely modern. They were the first society in history to be almost entirely dependent on takeout. They didn't meal prep. They didn't have pantries. Every single day, 1 million people emptied out of their vertical slums and hit the streets for one reason. They were hungry, and they needed someone else to do the cooking. This created the Thermopolium, the ancestor of McDonald's, Chipotle, and the New York Bodega, all rolled into one. The architecture of the Big Mac. If you walked down a street in Pompeii or Rome, you wouldn't look for a golden arch. You'd look for an L-shaped stone counter sticking out right onto the sidewalk. This was the Thermopolium, literally, a place where hot things are sold. Let's look at the hardware of these places. These weren't just tables. The counters were high-tech for the time. They were embedded with large terracotta jars called dolia. The engineering of the counter, the insulation. These dolia weren't just sitting there. They were often built into the masonry of the counter itself. In some cases, there would be a small fire pit underneath, or a system of hot water to keep the stews inside at a simmer for hours. The layout. The L shape was strategic. It allowed for a grab-and-go window on the street side for people in a rush, while the interior offered a few benches for those who wanted to linger and likely get into a fight. The visuals. They were painted in appetizing colors. In the famous Regio V. Thermopolium unearthed in Pompeii recently, the counter was decorated with vivid frescoes of ducks and roosters. This wasn't just art. It was a visual menu for a population that was largely illiterate. I want the thing that looks like that bird over there. What was on the menu? If you stepped up to the counter with a few asses, the small copper coins of the era, what were you eating? It wasn't pizza. Tomatoes wouldn't arrive from the Americas for another 1,500 years. It wasn't pasta as we know it. 1. The daily special. Polenta and porridge. The backbone of the Roman diet was grain, specifically pulse pottage. Imagine a thick, savory oatmeal made of farro or barley, flavored with whatever was cheap that morning. Maybe some onions, a bit of lard, or if you were lucky, some chopped greens. 2. The meat. The nose-to-tail reality. Romans loved pork, but the fast food version wasn't a ham sandwich. It was the scrap meat. We're talking tripe, pig trotters, and icitia aumentata, which was essentially a Roman burger. They would grind up meat with pine nuts, pepper, and wine, wrap it in caul fat, the lining of the stomach, and grill it. 3. The secret ingredient, garum. Every single thing you bought at a Thermopolium was drenched in garum. If you want to understand the smell of a Roman fast food joint, you have to understand garum. It was fermented fish guts. They would pack fish entrails in salt and leave them in the sun for months until they liquefied into a salty, umami-rich syrup. It was the ketchup of the ancient world. It hid the taste of meat that was slightly past its prime. 4. The drinks, hot wine and water. Romans rarely drank neat wine. That was considered barbaric. In a Thermopolium, the most common drink was calda, wine mixed with hot water and spices. It was the latte of the Roman morning. On a cold winter day in the city, you'd grab a bowl of hot, spiced, watered down wine to jumpstart your heart before heading to work at the docks.